Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Pitt County Planning Board meeting out there in the TV land, and also everyone that's in the audience tonight with us. If we could have the roll call by tab.
Dave Barefoot.
Here.
Brad Guth.
Here.
R.J. Hamby. Ricky Hines.
Here.
Clayton Malloy Jr.
Here.
Matt Nobles.
Here.
Johnny Penner.
Here.
Kenneth Ross.
Here.
And Danny Smith.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, Maria Rogerson and Anthony Herring called, and they will not be here tonight.
Thank you. Next, we will have the prayer by Mr. Johnny Penner, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by Clayton Malloy.
Pray. Lord, we give you thanks for this beautiful day you've given us. Thank you for the blessings that we all enjoy. Just ask a special blessing on each one that's here tonight. And that any and all decisions that we might make would be in the best interest of all parties. I ask that in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, next up, we have the minutes from the March 21st meeting. Hear a motion.
So move to accept.
Second.
Who first and who second? Johnny and who seconded? Okay.
You ready? I have a motion on the floor that we accept the minutes as mailed out. All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right. Just moving right on along. Next up, we have Mr. Chris with Laurel Oaks addition.
The review portion of your agenda starts on page 18. We have Laurel Oaks Addition preliminary plat. This board has reviewed this plan before. Several items have changed that require board approval, and I'll get into those in a little bit. So just some locational information. It's located on Bedford Road west of its intersection with Blackjack Simpson in the Grimesland Township. It's located within the Village of Simpson's ETJ. So the village will have zoning jurisdiction. 53 lots and 58.5 acres.
Okay.
So as I mentioned earlier, the previous version of this plat was conditionally approved by the board on March 15th, 2017. Since then, the developer's acquired adjacent property and has been able to add 6 more lots. A second stub road has been added, and previously the streets were proposed private to be maintained by a homeowners association, and now they will be dedicated as public. So as you can see here, the location of the subdivision is just south of Simpson, right inside their ETJ in the yellow. On the left, you got a little more zoomed in map. Again, it's right within the ETJ. On the right, it's even further zoomed in, so you can see the features a little bit. And I have pictures I've taken, and I'll show you those later. Here's the plat itself. It's 2 sheets. So sheet 1 is on the left. That shows the entrance off Bedford Road. And sheet 2 is on the right. You'll see it at the rear of the property, a cul-de-sac. So I'm going to highlight several changes that were made to the plan. The first of which is on sheet 1. That shows the parcel that was acquired, and this is where the additional lots are being added. And on sheet 2, you'll see I've highlighted where the second stub road is going to be located. So some site information. A portion of the site is within the 100-year floodplain. It's zoned both agricultural residential and neighborhood residential. Electricity is going to be provided by GUC, and water service will be provided by Eastern Pines Water Corporation. Let's move on to some conditions and requirements. From the planning department, show the land use and zoning district for all adjacent properties. We will require both a revised construction plan and sedimentation erosion control plan, and a wetland determination will be required. More conditions from planning. We need to ensure that the minimum building lines from all streets are shown. And then several proposed parcels span 2 zoning districts. The parcels that span 2 zoning districts must meet the strictest lot dimension and setback requirements of the zoning district it's in. The county schools, the parcels are assigned to G.R. Whitfield and D.H. Conley. For engineering, they need to show a swale on the rear of lots 48 and 49. An easement will be needed for the temporary cul-de-sac at Landon Drive, which is one of the stub roads. And then a detail for the temporary cul-de-sac in the entrance of the subdivision should be included on the construction plan. So Southeast Drainage Corporation has a drainage lateral that runs through this property. They ask that nothing should be placed in the channel that will slow or back up the flow, and it should not be any alterations to the drainage lateral, and they will need to be notified if any additional pipes are installed. We have a few conditions from NCDOT. Site distance triangles need to be shown on Lacey Drive. Future plans need to show water valves outside of the pavement area. A soil report will be required, and the water line should be shown in the 10-foot water line easement and outside of the right-of-way. They also say that an encouragement agreement is required for the cross line and junction box and for the water line tap on bedded road, and any proposed water line taps shall be made such that water valves are not within asphalt areas. Street designs must meet current NCDOT standards for radius, dimensions, proposed utility, depth, and pavement. The island at the entrance needs to be shown in more detail in a construction plan, and they will have more comments once a revised construction plan is submitted, since the streets are now going to be public, so they'll be more heavily involved in that aspect of plan review. Next, I got a few pictures of the site. You'll see I have the pictures on the left, and on the right you'll see a map, and it'll have an arrow of where I'm standing, what direction I'm facing, to help orient you. And as you can see, they've started work based on the previously approved plans. So this picture, I'm standing kind of at Bedded Road, facing north at the main entrance to the subdivision. This picture, I've kind of went into the road and I'm facing towards Blackjack Simpson Road. This is where a cul-de-sac is going to be, called Lucas Court. This picture, I've now turned opposite direction. I'm facing the Sheffield subdivision. Still facing Sheffield, I've kind of turned to the right, more towards the north of the property. This, I have gone all the way back almost to the woods line, and I'm faced back towards Bedded Road. And then this last one is one of the stub roads, so it's Landon Drive. I'm facing east here. So I've notified adjacent property owners. I have not received any phone calls, emails, any correspondence from them. And the Technical Review Committee does recommend conditional approval of this plan. So I'd be happy to go over anything else or field any questions you have.
Anyone have any questions for Chris?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion we approve this and go ahead.
Okay, have a motion on the floor.
I second that.
And a second. All in favor of the motion that we go ahead and approve this, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
All right, moving right on along. Next up is Southwest Bypass Corridor Plan Use Monthly Progress Report by Mr. Eric.
Sir, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just here to provide the monthly report on our progress on developing the Southwest Bypass Corridor Land Use Plan. We do have several completed tasks, that you see those in your packet tonight. First, the major completed task we had our first community meeting at Pitt Community College. That was on April 9th. This is a picture of the space that we had. We had approximately 60 people that showed up for the meeting that evening. Got a lot of good input. One of the sort of trends that we have identified early on at the meeting was a lot of folks really want to sort of retain an agricultural, rural feel to the corridor. So we've taken a lot of comments in on that, and we'll be using those to help sort of draft some of our goals and objectives and implementation strategies, and also our future land use map for that area. This is just another picture of the meeting that we held. Our consultant Stewart Inc., they began developing some land use scenarios. We presented those to the steering committee to kind of begin looking at how we're going to shape the future growth and development of that area. This is some of the material that was presented also at the community meeting. You see there, we do have 4 sort of land use scenarios to choose from at this point. It could be one of those. It could be sort of an amalgam of all of them. But that's one of the things with the steering committee they're going to look at and take some of the comments in from the community meeting and some of our online survey results and start figuring out what pieces of these maps we're going to use. So you see also up in the corner there, there's more details and more policies that are sort of proposed for each of these scenarios. And down in the right-hand corner, you see that is sort of a heat map that's generated through the modeling software that the company is using to sort of look at where certain things are most appropriate, whether it's a residential suitability, whether it's industrial or commercial. And it's a little bit different heat map than what we're used to, whereas the areas on these that are more suitable for each one are shown in the green, and the ones that are less suitable are shown in the red. So you can see for the residential, there's a significant amount of green on the very far left side, whereas when you get to the industrial, as you get out into the western areas of the corridor, then it's not going to be as suitable for those types of uses. So finally, we will also be conducting our next steering committee, or we conducted the steering committee meeting number 3 on March 27th. And also, as I mentioned, we do have an online survey that's still up and available. I'll be running at least through probably the end of next week, through the end of the month. So if anybody's still interested in it, you can direct them to our website, and they're still free to take that survey, and we'll take their input and use it as far as developing this plan. Our next steps, we're going to begin, again, reviewing and analyzing that input we've received already, begin finalizing our land use scenario and that future land use map. Also going to begin the transportation analysis component. We have a sub-consultant, this WSP, that will be coming in and helping us with that. Then begin developing our implementation strategies and that draft plan that we'll end up presenting to this board and to our partners. And then also we'll have our 4th steering committee meeting on May 1st. So again, this is our contact information. If you know anybody or if anybody watching tonight needs any more information on the plan, you're free to contact myself or Jake Petrosky. He's our project manager with Stewart. Also, again, the links also to our survey and to our project website. So with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions anybody might have.
Anyone have any questions for Eric? Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Mr. James Rose.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of informational items, and again, I just wanted to follow up on one thing Eric mentioned. This planning process for the Southwest Bypass land use plan is going quite well. Eric's doing a good job keeping that posted, getting folks involved, and again, want to thank both our chairman and Ms. Fay for serving on the steering committee. The input from the local people, Ayden, Winterville, Greenville, Pitt County has been instrumental in giving us the information we needed to take out to the public a couple of weeks ago. So we're off and running on this, and if all goes well, we'll have you a draft plan sometime this summer for consideration to send a recommendation on to the commissioners. So a couple of informational items. One that's included in your package tonight, the Woodmore Farms street improvement process. You may recall we had a blue ribbon committee several years ago that went through, looked at a lot of detail on subdivision streets, especially those that are public or intended for public maintenance. And sometimes they don't quite make it through the process of getting the petitions approved and have DOT to accept the roads for any type of maintenance, and therefore some of them start to fall in disrepair. This subdivision is one such, and the county now has a policy based off state statutes that allows the county to front the money, have the improvements put in, and then there's a repayment process by those affected property owners. So we're right here in Woodmore Farms. We've got about 50-some properties, 52 to be exact. You can see, based on the map here in front of you, those that have signed petitions and those that haven't, the magical number is 75%. And at our last reading, it was dead on 75% for those that have signed. So handling things a little bit differently this time. We were out on site yesterday doing a walkthrough with prospective contractors, had 6 contracting firms interested in the project, and in turn showed them some of the major problems out there on site so they could get their bid packages together and submit them back to us by sometime in early May. We'll get that before the commissioners at their second meeting in May and get a determination as to whether this project proceeds forward or not. That goes on to say we'll know how much the costs are going to be based on those bids. We'll have the bid opening earlier in the month, so the folks that are affected will know how much how much their payment will be per year, even before the commissioners see that. In other words, they can withdraw their petition beforehand if necessary. And since it's sitting right at 75%, if it dips below 75%, that will be the determining factor in and of itself without any commissioner action. So a lot of steps. The way we've got it laid out now, if it progresses on, we'll be doing the construction work sometime during the summer, ideal time for that. Hopefully get it wrapped up in the fall, but it will truly be, this project will extend on into early next year by the time the Department of Transportation will go through the acceptance process. So this is basically about a 10-month process from start to finish. So you'll be hearing more about this project if it does progress on. Any questions about that item? And I will tell you too, Chris, as part of our subdivision ordinance amendments a few years ago that came out of our Blue Ribbon Committee, Chris goes out and does an annual inspection of all our roads. You got that report back in December. He has also followed up with those developers that either have some issues with their roads or they need a little prompting. The roads are in good shape. Go ahead with the petition process with DOT to get them accepted. So trying to be more proactive and continue to get these roads accepted if they're eligible. Any questions?
James, I'm just curious, the payback plan, is that assessed in property taxes?
It is. It's actually, the way it's scheduled right now, we've only been through one of these. We just finished with Woodmore subdivision that's just adjacent to Woodmore Farms. And what will happen for a 10-year period on their annual assessment, they will get also, that will be included on their annual tax bill. So just handled through our tax office through that billing process. Other questions? Okay. Just one other informational item, and just want to recognize our chair did attend our workshop that the county hosted. We had the School of Government officials in to talk about legislative decisions, basically those types of decisions you deal with typically on a monthly basis, primarily with zoning or rezoning questions and concerns. It was quite appropriate after last month's meeting to have this type of training. And the chairman just asked that I share a few highlights with that. Tab has provided at your station tonight the actual PowerPoint presentation that came out of that. We can go into more detail in the future if you've got questions. I'm going to hit some of the high spots of this, and you'll see kind of running through that PowerPoint. Had an introduction talking about why do we even plan, especially at a county or municipal level, and what the relationship between planning and zoning is and should be. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as far as what the legislation now requires. Talked about planning board's authority, 7 or 8 items that are mentioned right in the state statutes that you have the authority to do, carry out plans, serve as an advisory in an advisory capacity for the commissioners, those sorts of things. One of the big things that we talked about too, and we've known this is brewing is that there is a proposal for a total rewrite of all the planning legislation. That's been out there for a couple to 3 years now. It passed one of the houses last long session, coming back before the other one this time. So if it does in fact pass, we may have some new planning legislation. A lot of it's just a rewrite and reorganization of what's already there, but there are a few other changes. So if that happens, probably we'll be given a year or two to make that effective, whether we've got to change some information in our zoning ordinance, land use plan, or whatever, we can have time to do that. I'll tell you, some of the existing language that's in the planning legislation is almost 100 years old. It was adopted back in 1923, so needless to say, it's some old language in there. Some of it's still very relevant, but it would be a big improvement just to have that consolidation of the municipal and county regulations together, because we're in 153A, they're in 160A, and it's a lot of duplicative language. So that's one major improvement. Probably the big thing that I think you guys probably could have gotten some benefit from before last month's meeting was the discussion of legislative decisions and what you can include as part of your decision-making process and what you can't. So quickly, with those legislative decisions, such as a rezoning request, you've got very broad discretion. How is it going to impact the adjacent properties? So this is all contrasted with quasi-judicial. If you were sitting on the Board of Adjustment, as Ms. Fay does, I'd tell you you're very scripted as what you've got to include and consider in your decision-making process. For you guys with the rezoning, fairly broad. There are a few exceptions. I won't get into all those tonight, but you can look at public interest, the appropriateness. Last month, for example, we talked about the density of development. Is it appropriate to be located where it is or requested to be located? All those things are appropriate to consider. And certainly one of the things that we lay our hat on now, the consistency with our land use plan. That is an interpretation. Mr. Hemby might have an interpretation. Ms. Fay has another one. Staff might have a third one. That is still a lot of discretion in there for individuals and the board as a whole to include in their decision-making process. We also talked about a lot of special uses that are oftentimes considered by planning boards, sexually oriented businesses, manufactured housing, signage. One of our favorite ones lately, agritourism. So all those sorts of things, there are special sections in the general statutes that tell counties and municipalities what they can't and can regulate as far as those uses are concerned. And then finally, more specifically, got into the rezoning process. So at the planning board level, you've got a little bit more wiggle room. You still, as you now know, you give that consistency statement. You also advise, in your opinion, whether it's in the public's interest and appropriate for consideration by the commissioners. Once it gets to the commissioner level, of course, they're required to hold public hearings as well. It's pretty much a scripted process there as well as far as what they have to consider and adopt that consistency statement and whether it's reasonable and in the public interest. So that's kind of where we were last. That session took 3 hours, I think.
Yes.
So you just got the 5-minute version of it. There's a lot of information in this handout. If you have any questions, be glad to talk with you about it. And Mr. Chairman, too, next week, Ms. Fay's going to be sitting in a Board of Adjustment training, and she's going to get a lot of different training than what we're talking about here tonight. But if this board would like some additional training, we'll be glad to bring this back, possibly get our attorney involved a little bit better, and give you some additional information if there's certain areas you'd like for additional information to be shared on. So I'll leave that to your discretion, Mr. Chairman, and a couple of other things are in your package as far as some articles that have been collected, even about your decision from last time and some of the newspaper reports there. And of course, we've got other information that's related to planning in there as well. So with that, Mr. Chairman, that's all I have for tonight. Welcome any questions.
Y'all have any questions for James? Well, what James was talking about as far as the legislative planning training that I attended, it was a great training. I learned a lot from it, and if y'all are interested in it, just email me and I'll get with James. But I would highly recommend it. We all could take a look at this and maybe do this together, because in that training, the training that they had, I saw Greenville had 7 of their 9 members from their planning board was actually at that training. And they just went through something kind of major too. So I think it was really eye-opening for them. I really can't speak to that, but I think it was really eye-opening to them because they was asking a lot of questions. And so I think it would be nice if we could look at it. Like I said, if y'all consider it, just email me. I'll get with James on it. And then the second part is I'd like to thank Eric for the good job he's doing with the Southwest Bypass. Working with the city of Greenville, Winterville, and Ayden, I think when we've been together, I've never seen something work as well as we've been working, and I hope it continues. And I think it's because of your presence, your leadership, along with Stewart's. I think y'all are doing a real good job and really appreciate it. And so, James, that speaks volumes for your planning staff. You're doing a good job with them.
Thank you,
really
sir.
appreciate it.
I'll sit down on that accord.
If there's no other questions, or anybody else have anything? Can I get a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor?